Hello, everybody. It is 5:16 a.m. Central Time on December 28th, 2016, and welcome into the Earthquake 3D live stream. This is your host, Dutchsinse. You can see me on the screen here temporarily. I want to welcome in everybody here who's new. If you are new, please subscribe. I'm trying to grow my operation into something noteworthy on YouTube, and we're doing pretty well. So good to see everybody in here who's a repeat viewer as well. Guys, obviously you know what's going down right now. If you're not aware, let me make you aware. A noteworthy series of earthquakes broke out at the California-Nevada border, just northeast of Mammoth Mountain volcano and just on the flanks of an old volcano, which I want to show you on the screen. And for you to see that, let me turn on my display capture and make sure you can see it. Okay, good. Okay, all right. You can see it on screen. Let me make my screen a little bit smaller so you can still see me talk. And all right, so as we look at this area, you're going to make out a few things that stand out right at the center of the screen. And I'm moving it around for dramatic purposes, but let me zoom in and see. Aurora Crater is a old volcano, and it's named Aurora Crater for a reason, because it's a past eruptive location. And this is an old, very viscous, chunky lava flow that flowed out the side of this volcano when a past eruptive event occurred here. It didn't just occur at this location. You can see the other lava flow extending off the other unnamed cone here, and the cone and sill off the side of the butte. At some point in the past, this erupted out of the cone that's covered in trees, and it flowed a 300-foot high chunky lava flow out a few miles at the most. So apparently this has happened in the past when eruptions have occurred. This chunky lava, this semi-melted lava, comes from an area called the asthenosphere. Now the asthenosphere is just a complex word for the semi-melted magma right down below the plate. Not down in the mantle where it's more liquid, but right at the borderline where the plate meets the magma. So it's semi-melted. And this chunky lava comes up and out, and it's more thick, viscous, and it only flows a short distance. And that's where the earthquake now is striking. This large swarm is happening directly in the middle of State Route 3C. And I mean directly in the middle of the road. Now, they're not doing any blasting there. This is about 18 kilometers down below the surface, which coincidentally, 18 kilometers is the approximate depth of these volcanoes here and the greater Mono Lake supervolcano. Now, most people don't consider this, or know about it being, I should say, a supervolcano. It's half the size of Yellowstone, size-wise. But out of the center is a rising dome. You can see that here. And it's erupted in the past, obviously indicated by it's a large caldera. Now, on the flanks of that caldera are the Mono craters, the Long Valley caldera, the Inyo craters, and Mammoth Mountain. And we can zoom in on this, and you'll see the craters that are marked here. Inyo Crater Lakes, for instance, and an old butte there, an old cone. Then we have the obsidian domes here. This one is even creatively named Obsidian Dome. And for anybody who's into geology or volcanology, obsidian, an obvious volcanic product. So, Mono Lake Volcano is the greater player in the region, and the earthquake swarm is happening on the flanks of the other volcanoes on the side of this supervolcano. Now, we see volcanoes, smaller volcanoes, form around these supervolcanoes. Yellowstone's the perfect example. Here's Yellowstone, for instance, up here. Everybody's familiar with Yellowstone. Well, just to the west of Yellowstone, out into Idaho, we have a whole series of volcanoes, just like the other ones over in California, but much younger. And when I say younger, I mean we're talking about these are, I actually camped out at Craters of the Moon up here, and it's still, there's no vegetation. I mean, it's still the glassy lava flows. I camped out here. Okay, so the reason I camped out here, I was doing a radiation test across the country after Fukushima blew, and we stopped here along the way and literally camped. I'm zooming in on the campsite where I pitched my tent down here in the lava field, and it was just tremendous, guys. But so you can see the cones here. This is just another example of volcanoes that form on the sides or the flanks of these supervolcanoes. And the bigger the supervolcano, the further away the volcanoes form on the flanks of. So back down here in California, you'll be able to see the resemblance now. Okay, only these, when they're out in the desert, don't get any tree coverage, don't get anything except for this desert vegetation, which thrives in the rocky soil. Which, coincidentally, when it does rain there, very rarely, but when it does, this volcanic rock is very porous and it captures and stores large volumes of water, which enables tree growth in those locations over time, which is why you see trees growing all over this when there's no trees growing in the sand. Here, just small, sparse desert vegetation, but then the trees are taking hold here because these rocks hold water. Okay? So, understand, 600 people in here right now. You got to hear this and hear me out really good on this. We issued multiple warnings over the past several days for a 5.7 to 5.8 to be striking in California. And when I issue warnings, I issue them for a region, but I try to get it down to a few 100-mile radius. Now, from time to time, it goes beyond a few 100 miles. In this case, it's about 400 miles beyond the radius. But we named California for 5.7, and lo and behold, the 5.7 hit on the day we warned for. Now, we issued a 72-hour watch for it 3 days ago. Today is the end of the 72-hour watch, and the earthquake is hit. That wasn't the only earthquake, though. Off the coast, there was a 4.3. So, the 4.3 that struck on the coast is indicative of two things. One, the movement off the coast pushed to the east-southeast. It struck before this large earthquake at the California-Nevada border. Secondly, when I did my update last night at 10 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. West Coast Time, we talked about this 4.3 off the coast, and we said it was a larger earthquake. I showed you the station list, and I let you guys decide for yourselves. You saw the station list for yourself, topping out at 6.9, not 4.3. And I talked about, it's the old saying, and I keep repeating it because it's kind of funny to me. It's, if the tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? And in this case, if a large earthquake strikes off the coast and the USGS is only there to report it, does it get reported as a large earthquake? Okay, I'm being sarcastic, but it's trying to make a good point that they're not reporting the accurate earthquakes for many different political reasons, none scientific that I can find so far. And in this case, when I said earlier, I said, look, it looks more like a 5.7 off the coast. Right? I mean, you can go back and listen to my 10 p.m. update. I said something like that. Then I said, we'll know by tomorrow or the day after if it was a 5.7 because we'll see a large earthquake strike over to the east of similar size. And then I said, well, let's go with it. If it's a 4.3, then a 4.3 will strike over to the east. If it's a 5.7, then a 5.7 will strike over to the east. And what happened? Greater than a 5.7 struck over to the east. This combined total right here between the 5.7, the 5.5, the 5.5, and the 5.6, those alone add up to 6.2. Add in all the 2s, 3s, and 4s, we're taking it up to a 6.5 relative expenditure of energy in the course of an hour to 2 hours. Like I said, same time that happened, the earthquake spread out to the east by southeast. Again, take a look at it. I'm going to turn off our rings. The earthquakes spread out in the past hour to 2 hours to the east by southeast, topping out at 2.0. I'm sorry, 2.8. The most recent earthquake over to the east, the 2.0. Each one of these locations, as we go over to the east, is striking near or directly at a nuclear test site. It just so happens that there's also several different volcanoes at these locations. And I can show them to you. You guys can go look them up yourself by pulling the coordinates. But I'll just take the largest of the earthquakes and we'll go show you. So you see Tonopah, Nevada. Now, when I say nuclear operations, they're not doing current blasts, okay? The reason that there's earthquakes striking here is because they fractured the crust next to these ancient volcanoes. So there's volcanoes and nuclear test sites right next to each other. And we'll just back this out, and you'll see the volcano, Monte Cristo Hills Volcanic Center. Huge, right? I mean, it really is. It's massive. But then if you go down to the south just a little bit, you get down into Pahrump, and we start getting into our blast sites which is troubling because when the blast sites are hit, let me show you the blast sites. Okay, take a look at it. Let me get a sip of my coffee. Ooh. Whoa, it's piping hot. That's from my viewer. This coffee is from my viewer, dedicated viewer, up in the Northwest United States. They sent me several packs of Raven's Brew coffee. Really good stuff. Not getting paid to promote them. It's just really, really good. Anyways, so see all these craters? Okay, every single crater is a spot where there's been an underground nuclear test. They also built that famous town that they blew away and got on film, and they recreated it in the Indiana Jones movie with the mannequins in the house in the 1950s setting. Okay, well, these spots are spots where they detonated it under the crust or under the ground, which fractures the crust. And with this many detonations, not just there, but over to the west, over to the east, look what's also there. Okay, I mean, throughout the entire location, you have more volcanoes like this. This is an old volcano. There's hundreds of them, meaning that this spot in the past has erupted so many times. And the reason it erupts is because pressure comes in from the west coast and it pushes into the east-southeast. So we zoom back in on our earthquake location here, and this whole location in between is military test sites. You can see the military landing strips. You can see this laid out here. But connecting between here, Lizard Hills, and then we get right back up to our volcanic center. And this volcanic center, take a look at this, the Monte Cristo Hills. I mean, you want to talk about a past littered with volcanic eruption and how many different obsidian flows. Look at this. At some point in the past, this is not false color. This is true color, guys. So when you take a look at it, it's just significant. There were many different eruptions that occurred here in this volcanic center, and it's huge. To call it a volcanic center is accurate because there's so many different, well, I mean, it connects into another one right here. Koledad Volcanic Butte. Still covered and tufted with obsidian, so much that you could just, every person on the planet could have a piece of obsidian. It wouldn't even remove one portion of that little mountain right there. Okay, so all in all, pressure is striking at these volcanic centers because of the greater pressure that's been coming off the coast. So it's a boatload of volcanoes and nuclear test sites being hit. That's what's going on. And again, they're not detonating nukes. The only reason it's being struck is because of the fractures in the crust. Okay? That all being said, what can we expect over the next day to 2 days? Well, I would say that over the next day to 2 days, we have to look to the east by southeast from this location. Why are we looking by the east to southeast? Well, earlier in the day, I told you, up here where the arrow is, a noteworthy size earthquake struck. They went with the ultra low ball, and I mean ultra low ball. They lowered it by almost 100-fold in power. So we have to imagine that as a 5.7 because that's what it was. So 5.7 struck there earlier in the day. That pushed to the east-southeast, hit at the volcano, right? At those volcanoes. Pressure coming up, hits these old magma chambers, and the first thing it does, it fans out and it cracks at a fracture point that was previously created by Mother Nature from these lava tubes that come up from the magma chamber. So it strikes at 19, 20 kilometers deep, right above the magma chamber or right at the hardened top of the magma chamber before it comes up into the tuft. So, first earthquake struck off the coast. Then the earthquake struck at the center of the screen. Now earthquakes are transferring to the east by southeast. This always happens. This happened earlier this week. Anybody aware of what happened earlier this week? Let me show you. A previous 4.3 struck off the coast. You see it there in red? Okay, that 4.3 was followed the next day by a 4.0 in Colorado and a huge swarm in Oklahoma. It pushed to the east. Well, now we have a larger earthquake striking, or similar in size. And that's going to push to the east. Now, when it pushes to the east, it's going to hit the edge of the craton. And for you to understand the edge of the craton, let me bring up a different graphic. Let's search craton Dutchsinse. You guys can do this. Pretty interesting. Click on images, and you're going to see past graphics that I put out over many, many months' time. Actually, years, actually. We put this graphic out. And this helped define our arrows that are on the map now. But let me just click on any one of these pictures here. Okay, you see the graphic of the craton on the right. If it'll load, there it is. Okay, you see the purple portion, you see the green portion, and you see the brownish, tannish color. Okay, that interior edge of the craton becomes displaced when there's movement out to the west in the green or in the purple. So, if there's a large earthquake in the green, it pushes to the east, it hits the edge of the craton, and it displaces everything from Yellowstone all the way south through Texas back up into Oklahoma. This whole portion has pressure coming in on it right now. It's mainly coming to the east by southeast, which means it's going in towards Colorado, it's going in towards New Mexico, and it's going to push to the east by southeast. But when it pushes to the east and southeast, it's going to drag on this northern edge, and it's going to stress Yellowstone. Should cause a swarm up at Yellowstone. Not a huge earthquake, not an eruption, should cause a noteworthy swarm of some kind in the next 2 days. Same time that happens, pressure is also transferring down to the southeast to Southern California. The way we know that, there's a small moderate swarm breaking out south of Salton Sea at Cerro Prieto volcano. Cerro Prieto is the volcano with the graffiti inside of it that I've showed so many times in so many different videos. The graffiti that people have carved into the crater of the volcano. It's in Mexico, right across the border. So, there's a volcano there and it's being hit. The reason it's being hit is because all the other volcanoes are being hit. The reason those are being hit is because pressure is coming from off the coast. It's hitting the old magma chambers and the pressure seeks a way out. It's a fracture point, previously made by Mother Nature a long time ago. It's vulnerable. It's like a perforation on a cardboard box and you're bending it, okay? So it's not just going to stop there, though. The pressure is going to go further to the east. And like that craton graphic I showed you, like these arrows show you, it's going to excite the pumping operations. These are man-made drill points that humans have drilled down into the crust by thousands of times. Those drill points are going to be vulnerable because they act like perforations on the edge of the plate. Let me get another sip of my coffee. All in all, I want you guys to be prepared. So understand that when large earthquake activity strikes on the West Coast, it's immediately followed within a few days' time in the Midwest at the pumping operations. Now, how big is it going to be? Well, we've seen in the past when a large earthquake strikes, let's say a 5.8 struck on the West Coast before this year, it was followed by a 5.8 in Oklahoma. It lost no momentum. But there were also no swarms in between the two. One happened, then the other. Nothing cutting the two off. Nothing relieving the pressure between the 2 points. If something strikes in between Oklahoma and this swarm out here at the Nevada border, then that might relieve some of the pressure off of Oklahoma itself. But Oklahoma is the central fulcrum point, the bend point, where we're going to see the next round of movement strike in the next couple days. Either a noteworthy swarm or a single larger earthquake. Right now, energy is still expending itself at these volcanoes. So if you're just now tuning in, let me sum this up one more time. The largest earthquake to strike in years at the California-Nevada border has hit. And it's not just for California and Nevada, it's pretty much for the state of Nevada. It's the largest earthquake in a very long time. And this noteworthy earthquake was accompanied by other noteworthy earthquakes, every one of them at first at least measuring 5 to 5.7. So not just one, multiples. Same time that happened, a huge swarm broke out, which you see stacked on the screen here. And when we zoom in on the area, let's put the coordinates in. And these are from the USGS, so we can take them to the bank pretty much. Okay, so here's our swarm. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong earthquake. Hold on. Let's back this out and do it one more time. Let's go get our proper coordinates for the 5.7. Sorry, happens. That was the previous earthquake we looked up. Okay, here it is. 5.7. Let's grab the coordinates. Better to do this anyways. Grab them every time in case they change them. Sometimes they'll update the coordinates almost instantly, and they don't tell anybody. It just updates, and they've revised the earthquake. So here's the most recent coordinates for the 5.7. While zooming in, another sip of coffee. So, here's the earthquake, striking right in the middle of a road. The road is called State Route 3C in Nevada. And when we back it out, you're going to see it's on the flanks of a place called Aurora Crater. All right, Aurora Crater, just like its name, is an old volcano. And clearly you can see over to the east the other one, the other volcano, but it's unnamed. There is no designated name for this volcano. So, here it is. You can see the crater at the center, the old cinder cone, and the sill where this ruptured. You guys remember Bartabunga volcano a few years ago over in Iceland when it ruptured and it flowed out over the countryside, over the glacier? Okay, well, the same thing happened here, only on a smaller level. It formed out in a small fissure that formed into a cinder cone very quickly. That cinder cone burst out on the side, and it flowed out that chunky contents of that semi-melted magma coming up from the asthenosphere, indicating that this spot erupts when there's pressure coming up from down below, down in the asthenosphere. The asthenosphere is the semi-melted magma down below the plate. That's just asthenosphere is just a word they created for it. Semi-melted magma down below the plate. Okay, chunky, not as melted as the magma down in the mantle. So that's the location being hit by this huge swarm. So we do need to be on watch for increased geothermal activity with this size of activity striking on the flanks of volcanoes that haven't erupted in millennia. And you know they haven't erupted in a long time. They're partially covered in sand and vegetation that's hard to grow in the desert to begin with. So it lets us know. Ancient volcano. But you can still make out the obsidian, the black basalt. It's not even that weathered over time, and this lava flow is so obvious. Okay? So, how many people are in here right now? 634? Okay, 634 people in here right now. I saw somebody asking me to unban someone. I'll take care of that after I get done doing this update. So just understand, everybody, you need to have your plans dusted off. For real this time. And you don't need to go buy stockpiles of food and water. You need to know what to do when an earthquake hits in the middle of the night and you got broken glass across the floor from glasses falling out of your cabinet that you didn't secure. You could have secured it with a 2-cent latch. I'm not trying to be condescending, but I do want to be somewhat humorous on this. I want you to understand that these mid-range 5s are enough to cause injury. It's enough to cause a chimney to collapse. It's enough to cause damage inside your house. And you can prevent some of these things, like the damage inside of your house, to some extent, by the preparations you make ahead of time. So whether that means you secure things with sticky undersides, that's one solution I saw people do that's really a good one. Over in Japan, this is the perfect example. Please listen. Over in Japan, when the big one hit, there was a video I saw right after 2011. I don't even know where it is. It was in Japanese. But it was one person who was earthquake prepared in Japan. And they had gone through their house, and all the stuff that they really valued that was on shelves, they had put this double-sided sticky tape cutouts. And it wasn't like the kind that leaves a residue. It's the good sticky tape. And they just put it on the underside of their vases and stuff. When the big 9.0 hit, they were right on the coast of Honshu. But they were up on a hill, so they didn't get hit by the tsunami. But none of their stuff that was secured with the sticky tape on the underside fell. All the stuff that wasn't secured was on the floor. The books, the everything, but their vases were standing. And they were like, they were blown away. They came back in their house and they're like, and they came in, they peeled it off, and they said, So, when you think about it, what does double-sided sticky tape cost to save your breakables on your shelves? If you live in earthquake country, it might be a good investment, right? Think about your kitchen cabinet, and do you have a latch? Do you have a latch on your kitchen cabinet? You really have to think about this. If your kitchen cabinet flies open and your dishes fly out, all of a sudden you've got broken glass, broken ceramic all across the floor. If you've got pets, they're scurrying about because there's an earthquake to begin with, and next thing you know, you are scurrying around trying to catch them with broken stuff all over the floor. And if you just jumped out of bed, which you probably did because it was midnight when it struck, then I would dare say you probably didn't have your shoes on. And if there's broken glass on the floor and you don't have your shoes on, it's like that Die Hard movie with Bruce Willis, with Hans whatever, and the broken glass all over the floor. So you don't want to have to walk across a bed of broken glass to go get your shoes before you can go get your pet who's running across the broken glass. And it could all be averted by a latch on your cabinet that cost $1 at the hardware store, or make your own for a few cents, right? Or a baby latch from the store. Those are even less obtrusive. They just, on the inside of the cabinet, it just clicks and you just press a little thing to open it up. Right? Little preps. I call it dollar store prepping. Dollar store prepping is almost better than stockpile prepping. Stockpile prepping, it's a good idea to have something for everything. So, for severe weather and for an earthquake and for all kinds of disaster scenarios, civil unrest. I understand why people have stockpiles of food and water. I've got a few of my own. But those are for those situations. When an earthquake hits, you want to be able to take cover and exit your structure as soon as possible if it's big enough, if the earthquake's big enough. So, first things first, take cover. Make sure you don't get hit by that falling plasma TV or the things you didn't secure. Second, you assess as the earthquake's happening, okay, is it feeling like my house is going to collapse? You'll know. And if you start hearing the cracks and creaking and the earthquake is still going on and it's a supermassive earthquake, which isn't happening now, by the way, but if it was, you would know when your house is taking that fall. And you would have to already have thought about which way am I going to run, what's going to be falling as I'm running. And you have to make sure your kids, your pets, everything that you would normally want to be secure would either be in a spot to be secure or that you would know what to do to help them get into that secure spot. I don't know your personal life situation. So I don't know whether you got a stone front on your house. I don't know if you're living in a brick house or in a frame house. Makes all the difference in the world when it comes to an earthquake of this size. Stone structures, you may want to check tomorrow, guys. You may want to check tomorrow. If you live in the area and this earthquake hit, go out and check your foundation on your house. Go out and check the driveway. Go out and check the sidewalks. Go out and look. If you live in a stone structure like a multi-high-rise, there are not many there. Luckily, this is the good news, is that this location, like I said, there's, it's a desert. Okay, the nearest real population center would be Bridgeport, and that's not even that big. Look, it's a small town. So if you live in Bridgeport, you might want to get, and if you felt the shaking and it felt significant to you wherever you were, if you live in the area, well, check your foundations tomorrow. Check the stone structures. See if there's any new cracks. It's big enough. It certainly is. And tomorrow, we'll have pictures coming out, whether it's damaged chimneys, damaged facades, cracks in roads, whatever. And let's see where I got a cat outside, guys. Hold on. Hold on. Come here. Meow. Oh, you hear the earthquake? All right, well, that sums up the update for now, guys. It is now 5:45 a.m. Central Time, 3:45 a.m. West Coast Time, 6:45 a.m. East Coast Time, and that is probably the most significant earthquake I've seen in California in a while, and the size of the swarm is definitely something that is alarming to everybody when they see it on the list, or if they see it on the globe. Let's go ahead and show you on the globe one more time. Okay, so here we are on the globe, and it's pretty obvious, right? It stands out above all else. It's huge. It should be treated as such, and over to the east, you should treat it as such. So it's like a deluge of water falling in a big storm up river from you. You would pay heed to it if it was a big flood coming your way, right? And you lived along a river. Well, if you live along the red lines, if you live along the interior edge of the craton, or if you live near the pumping operations, you now know the deluge is headed your way. It should just take a few days to get to you. How big is it going to be? It depends on how much it fans out across the area. That's it. How much steam is it going to lose? Well, in the past, we've seen it carry its momentum pretty much even. So if 5 strikes on the West Coast, a near 5 strikes in the Midwest within a few days. Or a swarm equal to that 5. All right, so 630 people in here now. Let's call it at, I'll do another update at 6:30 a.m. So that'll give us 45 minutes from now. I will do another update. So 6:30 a.m. Central Time, 7:30 a.m. East Coast Time, and 4:30 a.m. West Coast Time. I will be back on with a more detailed update as more magnitudes are reported and refined. Locations are going to be refined a little bit more, and certainly the swarm is going to carry on. This isn't the end of it. We're not out of the woods yet. So there's other activity developing around the Pacific. There's other activity developing over to the east and the Midwest within the next day to 2 days, which is going to be significant. And I want to tell you one more time, guys, much love. Thank you for getting the warnings out to the people. Thank you for subscribing. If you're new, please, again, subscribe if you are interested in these things. Sorry, guys, I got a cat, my cat is down. Okay, now it's up here on the table. Okay, so I'm done. Have a good afternoon, morning, evening, or night, depending on where you are on the planet. Peace out.